I am Autumn, 28 years old, with a degree in art history that my mother constantly mocked. Throughout my life, her dismissive laughter echoed in my ears whenever I mentioned my passion. But life has a funny way of turning the tables. The day I told her that my worthless degree was paying their mortgage while blocking all future transfers, her face crumbled. Now she claims they don't need me anyway. Let me tell you how we got here. Before I start my story, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments, hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had your dreams dismissed by someone who should have supported you. My earliest memories of falling in love with art trace back to when I was 7 years old. Our family had taken a trip to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. While my parents and younger brother Tyler rushed through the exhibits, I found myself transfixed by the colors, textures, and emotions captured on canvas. I stood in front of a Van Gogh for what felt like hours, completely lost in the swirling stars and cypress trees. My mother Grace eventually found me in the same spot where they had left me nearly 45 minutes earlier. Instead of being angry, she seemed amused by my fascination. She ruffled my hair and said, "You certainly have an eye for pretty pictures, sweetie. That can be a nice hobby as long as you choose a real career when you grow up." Even then, at 7, I felt a twinge of disappointment at her words. Why couldn't this be a real career? As I progressed through elementary school, my artistic talents began to flourish. My teachers would display my work during parent nights, and I would eagerly drag my mom and dad from classroom to classroom to show them my creations. My father James would smile warmly and praise my efforts. He was a kind man who worked as an accountant and always encouraged my interests. My mother, on the other hand, would nod politely and then quickly change the subject to my math scores or science projects. Grace was a successful real estate agent in our suburban community outside of Boston. She had built her business from nothing after getting her license in her early 20s. She was pragmatic to her core and viewed education solely as a pathway to financial security. Art to her was a luxury that came after practicality. "Drawing is fine for now, Autumn," she would say, "but you need to focus more on subjects that will help you earn a living later." Tyler, my brother, who was 3 years younger than me, seemed to absorb our mother's practical outlook from an early age. While I was drawing and painting, he was playing with toy cash registers and setting up lemonade stands. Grace beamed with pride whenever he counted his earnings or negotiated with neighborhood kids over trading cards. "That boy has business sense," she would tell her friends within my earshot. "He knows the value of a dollar." By middle school, the dynamic was firmly established. Tyler was the practical one who would follow in our mother's footsteps. I was the dreamer who needed to be redirected toward reality. When I reached high school, my passion for art only intensified. I excelled in art classes and developed a particular interest in art history. My art teacher, Ms. Dawson, recognized something in me that went beyond technical skill. She saw my ability to contextualize art, to understand the historical and cultural forces that shaped creative movements. "You have a unique perspective, Autumn," Ms. Dawson told me after class one day. "You don't just see the art, you see through it to the world that created it. That's a rare gift." For the first time, someone had put into words what I felt when I looked at artwork. I wasn't just appreciating beauty, I was connecting with human experiences across time and space. My excitement bubbled over at dinner that night as I shared Ms. Dawson's comments. My father smiled encouragingly, but my mother barely looked up from her plate. "That's nice, dear. Did you finish your calculus homework? The business program at State University is quite competitive." The familiar disappointment washed over me. By now I was used to it, but it still stung. Tyler, now a freshman, smirked across the table. He had already joined the Future Business Leaders Club and had our mother's complete approval. During my junior year, tensions escalated when I took an advanced placement art history course instead of AP economics. Grace was furious when she found out. "How will art history help you get into a good business program?" she demanded. "You're making choices that will limit your future." "Maybe I don't want the future you have planned for me," I replied, immediately regretting my boldness. The argument that followed was the first of many. My father tried to mediate, suggesting that I could minor in art while pursuing a business degree, but his compromise pleased neither of us. As senior year approached, I began secretly applying to art programs at various universities. Ms. Dawson helped me compile a portfolio and write my application essays. I applied to business programs too, knowing I would need to show my parents those acceptance letters to keep the peace. The entire time, I kept telling myself that I just needed to get to college. Then I could forge my own path. I just had to get through this final year under my mother's watchful eye. What I didn't realize was that the battle was just beginning. The real war would be fought not over where I would go to college, but over what I would study when I got there. The acceptance letters started arriving in the spring of my senior year. I had been admitted to several business programs which I dutifully showed to my mother. Her face glowed with satisfaction as she read each one. "State University has an excellent placement rate," she noted, setting aside the other letters. "Their business graduates average starting salaries of $60,000. That should be your top choice." What she didn't know was that I had also received acceptance to Braddock University's prestigious art history program, complete with a partial scholarship based on my portfolio and essay. I had hidden that letter in my desk drawer, working up the courage to reveal my true plans. The night I finally told them we were having a family dinner celebrating Tyler's academic award from his business teacher. It seemed as good a time as any, with everyone in a positive mood. "I have some news too," I said as the conversation about Tyler's achievement wound down. "I've been accepted to Braddock University's art history program, with a scholarship." The table fell silent. My father's fork hovered midway to his mouth. Tyler looked between our parents, waiting for their reaction. My mother's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to anger in the span of seconds. "Art history." Grace set down her glass with a thud. "Tell me this is some kind of joke, Autumn." "It's not. It's what I want to study. What I've always wanted." "This is absurd. No daughter of mine is wasting 4 years and thousands of dollars on useless knowledge about dead painters." My father tried to intervene. "Now, Grace, if she got a scholarship that shows they see potential in her." "Potential for what?" Grace snapped. "To be poor, to struggle finding work, to come begging us for money when she can't pay her bills with opinions about Picasso." The fight escalated quickly. I tried explaining the various career paths available to art history graduates: museum curation, art, authentication, education, auction house, evaluation, conservation. But Grace wasn't interested in facts that contradicted her worldview. "Those jobs go to people with connections or trust funds," she insisted, "not to normal people who need to earn a living." Tyler predictably sided with our mother. "Mom's right, Autumn. It's not practical. Everyone knows arts degrees are worthless in the real world." The argument ended with my mother issuing an ultimatum she would contribute to my tuition only if I pursued a sensible degree. Art history did not qualify. I spent the night crying, then woke up with newfound resolve. The partial scholarship would cover about half my tuition. I could take out loans for the rest and work part-time. It wouldn't be easy, but I could do it without my parents' financial support. When I announced this plan the next morning, my mother's expression was a mixture of shock and grudging respect for my determination. After several tense days of minimal communication, Grace and James had a private conversation that resulted in a compromise they would help with my tuition, but with constant reminders of their disapproval and the expectation that I would come to my senses and switch majors. It wasn't ideal, but it was enough to get me started on my path. As I packed for college that August, I made a silent promise to myself I would prove my mother wrong. I would turn my passion into a successful career, no matter what obstacles she placed in my way. The day I arrived at Braddock University felt like the first day of my real life. The campus was beautiful, with ivy-covered buildings and a renowned university museum. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who didn't question why I would want to study art history. Here, it was considered a rigorous academic discipline, not a frivolous pursuit. My roommate Jessica was studying archaeology, and we bonded immediately over our shared interest in historical artifacts. The first week was a whirlwind of orientation activities, campus tours, and introductory classes. When I called home that weekend, my mother immediately asked, "Have you checked out the business department yet? It's not too late to switch." "Mom, I just got here. I'm not switching majors before I've even attended a full week of classes." I'm just saying keep your options open. Your father and I aren't paying for you to come home unemployable. These calls became a regular feature of my college experience. Every conversation included some reference to my impractical choice or suggestions about more sensible alternatives. I began dreading our conversations and limiting their frequency. Holiday breaks were even worse. Being back in the same house meant constant exposure to passive-aggressive comments and pointed questions about job prospects. Tyler, now preparing for his own college applications exclusively to business programs, was held up as the model of sensible planning. "Your brother understands how the world works," Grace would say. "He's setting himself up for success." Despite the ongoing psychological warfare with my family, I found myself thriving academically. The art history department at Braddock was everything I had hoped for, and more. The professors were passionate and knowledgeable, the curriculum challenging and engaging. I discovered that my particular strength lay in contextualizing art within its historical and cultural framework. Where some of my classmates focused on technique or aesthetics, I was fascinated by how art reflected and influenced the societies that produced it. This perspective made me stand out to my professors, and eventually led to opportunities I couldn't have anticipated. But those were still to come. First, I had to navigate the increasingly turbulent waters of family expectation and personal determination. By the beginning of my sophomore year, I had settled into a rhythm at Braddock University. My art history courses were challenging but deeply fulfilling. I maintained a nearly perfect GPA and had begun working part-time at the university's art gallery, an opportunity that came through a professor who had noticed my enthusiasm and insight during class discussions. The gallery job paid modestly, but provided invaluable hands-on experience. I learned about exhibition design, preservation techniques, catalog preparation, and the business side of running a cultural institution. More importantly, I began building a network of connections with visiting artists, donors, and museum professionals who came through the gallery. At home, however, nothing had changed. If anything, my mother's dismissive attitude toward my studies had intensified. During my visits home, Grace would pointedly ask about my earnings potential or job prospects, often in front of family friends or relatives. "Autumn is very passionate about her art history," she would say with a tight smile. "We're still hoping she'll complement it with some business courses before graduation." The subtext was clear. My choice remained a disappointment. My father, James, had begun showing some genuine interest in my academic achievements. When I excitedly told them about receiving the highest grade in my Renaissance art seminar, he asked questions about the period and my research paper. Grace quickly changed the subject to Tyler's internship interview with a local financial firm. Tyler was now a freshman at State University, majoring in business administration, exactly as our mother had planned for both of us. His choice was celebrated at every turn. Grace proudly displayed his university pennant in her home office, while my Braddock acceptance letter had never even made it to the refrigerator door. The disparity in how our educational choices were treated fueled a growing resentment in me. Yet rather than discouraging me, it only strengthened my determination to succeed on my own terms. During my junior year, I secured a coveted summer internship at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. Though unpaid, the position was highly competitive with applicants from art history programs across the country. My professor had recommended me based on a particularly insightful analysis I had written on gender representation in post-war American art. When I shared the news with my parents over spring break, my father congratulated me warmly. My mother's response was predictably deflating. "An unpaid internship." Grace shook her head. "Tyler already has a paid position lined up for summer. That business degree is paying off before he even graduates." "This is an investment in my future," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "The connections and experience I'll gain are invaluable in my field." "Connections don't pay bills, Autumn," she replied. "Experience doesn't cover rent." What she failed to understand was that in the art world, these early unpaid positions often led to paid opportunities later. The museum industry, like many cultural institutions, relied on a progression from volunteer work to paid professional positions. It wasn't the direct path of business careers, but it had its own valid trajectory. The internship proved even more valuable than I had anticipated. I worked closely with the curator of contemporary art, assisting with research for an upcoming exhibition of emerging artists from throughout the Americas. My specific task was to provide historical and cultural context for works from artists in various regions. Dr. Eleanor Winters, the curator who became my mentor, appreciated my ability to connect contemporary works with their historical influences. "You have a gift for seeing patterns across time periods," she told me. "Many art historians excel at deep knowledge of a narrow specialty, but fewer can draw meaningful connections across centuries and cultures." Her encouragement meant everything to me. Here was a successful professional who valued exactly the skills and perspectives that my mother dismissed as worthless. By the end of the summer, Dr. Winters had invited me to contribute a short essay to the exhibition catalog, an extraordinary opportunity for an undergraduate. When I returned to Braddock for my senior year, I had a published writing credit in a major museum catalog, something many graduate students couldn't claim. My senior year brought more successes. I was selected to help curate a student exhibition featuring works from the university's permanent collection. The show received positive coverage in the local newspaper, with my name mentioned as one of the student curators. I sent the newspaper clipping to my parents, hoping for some acknowledgement of my achievement. My father called to congratulate me. My mother sent a brief text. "Nice to see your name in print. Hope this leads to something practical after graduation." As graduation approached, Dr. Winters encouraged me to apply for graduate programs in art history or museum studies. "With your talent and perspective, you could go far in this field," she said. "A master's or PhD would open doors to curatorial positions or academic roles." I was tempted but wary of taking on more student debt. My undergraduate loans already felt substantial, though they were less than they might have been thanks to scholarships and my part-time work. When I graduated with honors, my family attended the ceremony. My mother's congratulations came with the expected qualifier, "Now it's time to get a real job and put this behind you." I smiled tightly, having heard this refrain too many times to be surprised by it. What my mother didn't know was that I had already been applying for positions at galleries, museums, and auction houses across the country. I was determined to build a career that would eventually force her to recognize the value of my chosen path. The job market was challenging, as I had always known it would be. Cultural institutions were competitive and often operated with limited budgets. But I had something many other recent graduates didn't: practical experience through my gallery work and internship, a publication credit, and strong recommendations from respected professionals in the field. What I couldn't have anticipated was how the next phase of my life would unfold, or how dramatically it would change my relationship with my family. The journey from undervalued daughter to financial provider was about to begin, bringing with it a painful reckoning that none of us were prepared for. After graduation, I faced the harsh reality of the job market. Despite my qualifications and experience, full-time positions in my field were scarce, and competition was fierce. I reluctantly moved back into my parents' home, telling myself it would be temporary, just until I found my footing. Living under my mother's roof again meant daily exposure to her criticism. Each morning over coffee, she would scan job listings from business publications and leave them on the table for me, positions I neither wanted nor was qualified for. "Davis Investments is looking for account managers," she would say. "They probably don't care what your degree is in as long as you're smart and willing to learn. You could start building a real career." Meanwhile, Tyler had received multiple job offers before even finishing his junior year. Grace never missed an opportunity to highlight the contrast. "Your brother just got another raise," she announced at dinner one evening. 6 months out of college and he's already making $70,000 a year. That business degree is really paying off. I bit my tongue, focusing on my own path. Each day I applied for positions at museums, galleries, and cultural institutions. I reached out to contacts from my internship and university. I attended arts events to network and make new connections. It was exhausting and often disheartening, but I refused to give up. After 2 months of living at home, I secured an unpaid internship at the Hammond Contemporary Gallery in Boston. It wasn't ideal, but it kept me in the art world and might lead to future opportunities. Another unpaid position. Grace shook her head when I told her. At some point, Autumn, you need to accept that you're working in a field that doesn't value your contribution enough to pay you. What does that tell you? It tells me I'm in a competitive field where you have to prove yourself, I replied. Not every career path is as straightforward as real estate or finance. Grace laughed dismissively. You're 23 years old with student loans, living at home and working for free. Is that what you envisioned when you insisted on studying art history? Her words stung because they contained a grain of truth. This wasn't what I had envisioned. I had hoped for a smoother transition into my professional life, but I still believed in my choice and in my ability to succeed eventually. The Hammond internship was demanding. I commuted 90 minutes each way to Boston, worked 8-hour days without compensation, and often continued researching artists or exhibition themes in the evenings. My savings from university jobs were dwindling rapidly. After 3 months of this grueling schedule, my dedication paid off. The gallery's assistant director left for another position, and I was offered a paid role as a junior gallery associate. The salary was modest, barely enough to cover my student loan payments and basic expenses, but it was a start. I found a tiny apartment in Boston with a roommate, another recent graduate working in publishing. Moving out of my parents' house was liberating, even if my financial situation remained precarious. Grace's response to my new job was predictably pessimistic. That salary is barely above minimum wage, she noted. You could make more as a bank teller and at least have benefits and advancement opportunities. I ignored her negativity and threw myself into my new role. The Hammond Gallery specialized in contemporary artists from New England, giving me the opportunity to work directly with living creators, rather than just studying the works of those long dead. My art history background proved valuable in unexpected ways. I could contextualize contemporary works within historical movements and traditions, helping potential buyers understand the significance of the pieces they were considering. My knowledge of art market trends and valuation, though still developing, allowed me to assist clients looking for investment opportunities as well as aesthetic pleasure. The gallery owner, Martin Hammond, noticed my ability to connect with clients and artists alike. "You bridge worlds, Autumn," he told me. "You understand both the creative and commercial aspects of this business. That's rare." 6 months into my position, I received a small raise and more client-facing responsibilities. I was beginning to establish myself professionally despite my mother's continued predictions of failure. Family gatherings had become increasingly tense. Thanksgiving that year was particularly difficult, with Grace using the occasion to highlight the growing disparity between Tyler's career trajectory and mine. "Tyler just put a down payment on a condo," she announced to our extended family. 24 years old and already a property owner. We couldn't be prouder. Later, as I helped clear the dishes, she cornered me in the kitchen. "When are you going to get serious about your future, Autumn? This gallery job is a dead end. You're barely making ends meet while your brother is building real wealth." "I am serious about my future," I replied. "Just because my definition of success is different from yours doesn't make it invalid." "Success involves financial security," she insisted. "Something your art history degree clearly isn't providing." "It's early in my career," I said. "These things take time to build." Grace laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "Your degree means nothing in the real world, Autumn. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you can move on to something worthwhile." Her words cut deep, not just because they were cruel, but because they revealed how little she understood or respected my passion and choices. In that moment, standing in her kitchen surrounded by dirty dishes, I made a silent vow to prove her wrong no matter how long it took. What I couldn't have known then was that my opportunity would come sooner than either of us expected, and that the tables would turn in ways that would fundamentally alter our family dynamic forever. The next 2 years brought significant changes to my career. Martin Hammond introduced me to Eliza Kwan, an influential gallery owner, who was expanding her business to include emerging artists from overlooked regions of the world. After several meetings where I impressed her with my knowledge of art historical contexts and market trends, Eliza offered me a specialized role at Kwan International Gallery. "Your perspective on how contemporary works relate to historical movements is exactly what I need," Eliza explained. "Most of my staff are business-minded or have studio arts backgrounds. You bring something different." My new position came with a substantial salary increase, comprehensive benefits, and profit-sharing opportunities. I would be researching emerging art markets and identifying artists with potential for significant appreciation before they gained mainstream recognition. My art history degree, which my mother had so often ridiculed, was precisely what qualified me for this role. My understanding of how artistic movements evolved, how cultural contexts influenced creative expression, and how to authenticate historical influences gave me an edge in identifying genuinely innovative work with lasting value. Within months of starting at Kwan Gallery, I had helped acquire works from several artists whose pieces later tripled in value. My performance earned me another raise and expanded responsibilities. I moved to a nicer apartment in a better neighborhood, no longer needing a roommate to make rent. My professional success coincided with troubling developments in my family's financial situation. The real estate market had entered a downturn, affecting my mother's business dramatically. Sales slowed to a trickle, and properties sat on the market for months instead of days. During a rare family dinner, I noticed subtle signs of financial strain. The wine was cheaper than what my parents usually served. My mother mentioned canceling their annual vacation. My father seemed stressed and distracted. "How's the real estate business?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Challenging," my mother admitted reluctantly. "But it will turn around. Markets are cyclical." I learned from my father later that evening that things were worse than Grace had let on. Their savings had been depleted by months of reduced income. They had taken out a second mortgage on the family home to cover expenses and help Tyler after his company downsized, eliminating his position. "Your brother had to move back home temporarily," James explained. "He's struggling to find another job in this economy. A lot of financial firms have frozen hiring." The irony wasn't lost on me. Tyler's practical business degree hadn't insulated him from economic realities any more than my supposedly impractical art history degree had guaranteed poverty. A month later, I received an unexpected call from my father. "Autumn, I hate to ask this, but we're in a bit of a tight spot with the mortgage this month. Your mother would kill me if she knew I was calling you, but I'm wondering if you might be able to help, just until things pick up again." The request surprised me. My parents had never imagined a scenario where I might be in a position to help them financially. I agreed without hesitation, sending enough to cover their monthly mortgage payment. What I thought would be a one-time assistance soon became a regular occurrence. Each month, my father would call, apologetic but desperate. Each month, I would transfer the funds, telling myself it was temporary. My mother never directly acknowledged my financial help. When I visited, she would mention a loan from the bank or things finally picking up as explanations for how they were managing. Her pride wouldn't allow her to admit that her daughter with the worthless degree was keeping a roof over their heads. After 6 months of this arrangement, I received an incredible opportunity. A client at the gallery, impressed with my expertise, offered me the chance to make a significant investment in a collection of works by an emerging artist from South America. I had been following this artist's career and was confident their work would appreciate substantially. I used my savings and took a calculated risk. Within 3 months, the value of the collection had increased by 40%. I sold a portion of the works, replenished my savings, and retained the most valuable pieces for further appreciation. This initial success led to more investment opportunities. I began strategically purchasing undervalued works by artists I believed in, guided by my art historical knowledge and growing market instincts. My portfolio grew steadily, providing a significant supplement to my gallery income. Meanwhile, my parents' financial situation showed no signs of improvement. Tyler had found a new position, but at a much lower salary. He contributed minimally to the household expenses while continuing to live at home. My mother's real estate business remained stagnant in the depressed market. At family gatherings, the cognitive dissonance became increasingly difficult to ignore. Grace would still make dismissive comments about my career choice, even as my financial support became essential to maintaining their lifestyle. "Art is such an unstable field," she remarked at Christmas dinner while wearing a new sweater I suspected was purchased with my money. "You never know when the market might collapse." I bit my tongue, fighting the urge to point out the obvious irony. My father caught my eye across the table and gave me an apologetic look. The breaking point came during a family dinner with my aunt and uncle. Grace had prepared an elaborate meal, no doubt funded by my latest transfer. As we ate, my uncle asked about my job at the gallery. Before I could answer, my mother interjected, "Autumn works at an art gallery. It's creative, but of course not very practical. We always hoped she would follow Tyler into business. His degree has real-world applications." I nearly choked on my wine. Tyler, unemployed for months and recently settled for a position paying half his previous salary, was being held up as the model of practical career choices. Meanwhile, I was keeping the family home from foreclosure. My aunt, unaware of the financial dynamics at play, nodded sympathetically. "Well, at least she's doing something she enjoys. Not everyone can have a sensible career like Tyler." My mother laughed, the sound grating against my nerves. "That's true. Your degree means nothing in terms of real-world success, Autumn, but at least you're happy." Something snapped inside me. Years of dismissal, belittlement, and now blatant hypocrisy converged into a moment of perfect clarity. I set down my fork carefully. "Funny you should say that, Mom," I said, my voice steady despite the anger churning inside. "That worthless degree is currently paying your mortgage." The table fell silent. My mother's face flushed deep red. "What are you talking about?" she hissed. "Dad has been asking me for money every month for the past 8 months, I continued. "Where did you think it was coming from, the money fairy?" My father stared at his plate, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Tyler looked bewildered. My aunt and uncle shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "James." My mother turned to my father, her expression a mixture of fury and mortification. "Is this true?" My father nodded slowly. "The gallery has been very good to Autumn. She's been helping us through this rough patch." "And I've been happy to help," I added. "What I can't accept is continuing to hear how worthless my degree is while it literally keeps this roof over our heads." My mother pushed back from the table and stood up. "We don't need your charity, Autumn. We would have managed without it." "Really?" "Because Dad said you were 3 months behind on the mortgage when he first called me." The uncomfortable truth hung in the air between us. Without another word, my mother stormed out of the dining room. The dinner ended shortly after with awkward goodbyes and promises to catch up soon from my aunt and uncle. That night, I made a decision. I logged into my banking app and blocked the automatic transfers I had set up to my parents' account. If my support wasn't acknowledged or appreciated, if my education and career continued to be belittled even as they benefited from my success, then the arrangement needed to end. The next morning, I received a furious call from my mother. "What have you done?" she demanded. "The transfer didn't come through." "I've blocked all future transfers," I replied calmly. "As you said, you don't need my charity. You can't just cut us off. We were counting on that money. The money earned through my worthless art history degree, the career you've mocked consistently for years. Why would you count on something you believe has no value?" There was a moment of stunned silence before she exploded. "We don't need you anyway. Tyler has a promising interview next week. Your father has leads on consulting work. We will be fine without your condescending handouts." "I hope so," I said, "because they're not coming anymore." I ended the call and sat in my apartment shaking with a mixture of anger, hurt, and strange relief. I had finally stood up for myself and my choices. The financial cord had been cut, and with it the last vestiges of my need for my mother's approval. What I didn't anticipate was the complete silence that would follow. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months, without a word from anyone in my family, not even my father. It was as if by asserting my boundaries, I had severed not just financial ties, but all family connections. The silence was painful but also clarifying. For the first time in my adult life, I was free from the constant weight of disapproval. I could pursue my career and passions without the shadow of my mother's judgment darkening every achievement. As fall turned to winter and then spring, I poured my energy into my work and investments. I expanded my art portfolio, took on more responsibilities at the gallery, and began building a network of friends and colleagues who valued me for exactly who I was. What I couldn't know then was that the family story wasn't over. It was merely entering a new chapter 1 that would begin almost exactly 1 year after our confrontation with an unexpected knock on my door. During the year of estrangement from my family, I focused intensely on my career and personal growth. The freedom from constant criticism allowed me to take bolder risks professionally. I curated a successful exhibition of emerging digital artists that received coverage in several art publications. My investments continued to perform well, and I was promoted to senior curator at Quan Gallery with another substantial salary increase. Outside of work, I built stronger connections with friends who appreciated and supported my passions. Maria, a conservator I met through the gallery, became a particularly close friend. Her family welcomed me for holidays and celebrations, showing me what supportive family dynamics could look like. "They're proud of you for exactly who you are," Maria observed after I expressed surprise at her parents' genuine interest in my work. "That's what family is supposed to do." Her words highlighted the dysfunction of my own family relationships. Through occasional therapy sessions, I began processing the years of dismissal and emotional manipulation I had endured. I came to understand that my mother's treatment reflected her own insecurities and rigid worldview, rather than any actual deficiency in my choices. Despite the personal growth I was experiencing, there was still a hollow space where my family connections should have been. I missed my father, and even in complicated ways, my mother and brother. I sent birthday cards that received no acknowledgement. I tried calling my father's cell phone on their anniversary, but the call went to voicemail. The silence was complete until early spring, almost 11 months after our confrontation. My phone rang on a Sunday morning, displaying my father's number. I answered with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Autumn." My father's voice sounded tired and strained. "I know it's been a while, and I'm sorry for that. How are you?" "I'm good, Dad. Really good, actually. How are you all doing?" There was a pause before he replied. "Not well, I'm afraid. The house. We're losing the house, Autumn. The bank is foreclosing next month." My heart sank. Despite everything, I had never wanted my family to suffer. "I'm so sorry to hear that. What happened?" "The market never recovered enough. Your mother's commissions have been minimal. Tyler lost his job again and had to move to Philadelphia for a new position that barely covers his own expenses. We've depleted our retirement accounts trying to keep afloat." "What are you going to do?" I asked. "That's partly why I'm calling," he admitted. "We need to downsize dramatically, but even renting an apartment requires first and last month's rent security deposit, money we just don't have right now." I understood what he was asking. "Do you need financial help again?" "Yes," he said quietly. "But there's more to it than that. Your mother, she wants to talk to you. She won't admit it, but I think she finally realizes how wrong she was about your choices." I was skeptical but agreed to a meeting. 2 days later, I received a text from my mother asking if she could visit my apartment. I sent her my address, both nervous and curious about what this reunion would bring. When I opened my door to her knock, I barely recognized the woman standing before me. Grace had aged years in the months since I'd last seen her. Her hair, previously dyed a perfect chestnut brown, now showed significant gray. The confident posture was gone, replaced by a slight stoop. But most striking was the expression in her eyes, humbled, almost defeated. "Autumn," she said, her voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. "Thank you for seeing me." I invited her in, watching as she took in my apartment with new eyes. The spacious living room with large windows overlooking the city. The original artworks on the walls, some from artists whose value had increased significantly since my purchase. The tasteful furniture that spoke of financial comfort without ostentation. "You've done well for yourself," she said finally, sitting stiffly on the edge of my sofa. "I have," I agreed, offering no elaboration. Grace twisted her hands in her lap. "Your father probably told you about our situation." "He did. I'm sorry you're going through this." "Are you?" she asked, looking up sharply. "After how I treated you, I wouldn't blame you for feeling vindicated." The accusation stung. "I never wanted you to fail, Mom. I just wanted you to respect my choices." She nodded slowly. I'm beginning to understand that now. She took a deep breath. I was wrong, Autumn. About your degree, about your career prospects, about so many things. The admission which I had longed to hear for years felt surreal. Part of me wanted to savor the moment to finally feel validated after years of dismissal. Another part recognized the pain and humility it must have taken for my proud mother to speak those words. Why did you fight me so hard on this? I asked. Why couldn't you support what I loved? Grace was quiet for a long moment. I grew up with nothing, she finally said. My parents were artists always chasing their passions, never worrying about practical concerns like rent or grocery money. We moved constantly running from landlords living in friends' spare rooms. I swore I would never live that way as an adult, and I didn't want that life for my children. This was a side of my mother I had never seen before, a vulnerability she had kept hidden behind her pragmatic, controlling facade. I didn't know that, I said softly. I never told you. I should have. She wiped away an unexpected tear. Instead, I tried to force you into what I thought was the safe path. I didn't see that times had changed, that you had opportunities my parents never had, and I certainly never imagined that you would succeed so spectacularly by following your passion. The conversation continued for hours. Grace explained how the foreclosure notice had finally broken through her denial, how Tyler's repeated job losses despite his business degree had challenged her certainty about practical career paths, how seeing my success from afar through occasional updates from mutual acquaintances had forced her to reconsider everything she thought she knew about building a stable life. I'm not just here for money, she said eventually. Though we do need help and I'm not too proud to ask for it anymore. I'm here because I miss my daughter. I'm here to apologize and ask if there's any way we can start rebuilding our relationship. The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. This wasn't the manipulative Grace of the past, using emotional leverage to get what she wanted. This was a mother who had finally recognized what she had nearly lost through her own rigidity. Setting clear boundaries. I agreed to help them through the immediate financial crisis. I would assist with rental deposits and moving expenses, but not open-ended support. Any future financial help would depend on how our rebuilding relationship progressed and on their respect for my boundaries and choices. Grace accepted these terms without argument, another sign of how much had changed. As she prepared to leave, she paused at the door, looking at a small painting hanging in my entryway. This is beautiful, she said. What is it? It's an early work by Javier Menendez, I explained. I purchased it 3 years ago when he was just gaining recognition. Its value has increased about 800% since then. Grace shook her head in wonder. You really do know what you're doing, don't you? I do, Mom. I always did. I just needed you to see it. As spring turned to summer, my family and I began the slow, sometimes awkward process of healing our relationship. My parents found a modest apartment they could afford with my initial help and their reduced income. Tyler eventually called to reconnect, admitting he had gained a new respect for my independence and determination. The most significant moment came in August when I invited my family to the opening of a major exhibition I had curated at Quan Gallery. Walking my parents through the show, explaining the works, and introducing them to artists and collectors, I could see my mother truly engaging with my world for the first time. Midway through the evening, I overheard Grace speaking to an elderly patron who had asked how she knew me. I'm Autumn's mother, she said with unmistakable pride in her voice. My daughter made all this possible with her art history degree. She saw value where others didn't, including me. I couldn't be prouder of what she's accomplished. Hearing those words, I felt a knot of tension I had carried for years finally begin to unravel. The validation I had sought for so long had come at last, not because I had demanded it, but because reality had made it undeniable. That night marked a turning point in our family dynamics. While we still had moments of tension and disagreement, the fundamental respect for my choices was no longer in question. My mother began asking genuine questions about my work, seeking to understand rather than criticize. As I reflect on this journey now, I realize the greatest lesson wasn't about proving my mother wrong or vindicating my choices. It was about the courage to follow your authentic path, even when those closest to you can't understand or support it. It was about recognizing that sometimes the people who should believe in you the most are the least capable of doing so because of their own fears and limitations. Today, I mentor young art students and recent graduates navigating their own career paths. I tell them that success isn't measured solely by financial metrics, though my story certainly challenges the starving artist stereotype. True success comes from building a life aligned with your values and passions, even when that path isn't understood by others. Our deepest passions often lead us to our greatest purpose, even when the path isn't clear to those around us. Sometimes standing firm in your convictions means standing alone at least for a while, but by remaining true to yourself, you create the opportunity for others to eventually see the value in your unique vision. Have you ever had someone dismiss your dreams only to later realize their worth? Share your story in the comments. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of perseverance and vindication. And remember, sometimes the greatest satisfaction isn't in saying, "I told you so," but in living so fully that no words are necessary.